Okay, in this video, I'm going to cover rent to rent, and this is going to cover HMOs and serviced accommodation. Hugely powerful strategy. More than likely, the strategy that most of you are going to use to get you quick wins, get that quick cash flow into your portfolio, get the properties onto your books, and start building your net wealth. So, in essence, rent to rent, it's two forms. So we either then HMO the property or we SA the property. Now, the reason we've got to do that is because you're going to pay market value or thereabouts for to the landlord to get the property. Because if not, he's just going to rent it on an AST, and therefore there's no benefit in him reducing his rent to give it to you to rent on an AST. That just wouldn't work. The margins aren't there. So what we would do is we would basically take over the property. So let's just say, for argument's sake, I mean, the values are different. Obviously, HMOs will be bigger properties. So we'll work on, let's just assume we've got two 5-bed properties. We've got a 5-bed property. We're going to run it on HMO SA because you can run them on both. Okay, so market rent is $850. So that's what we're going to pay the landlord each month. We then have to fund the bills, the council tax, and the utilities. Okay, and we would then need to furnish them both. And we would need to then obviously advertise them and market them, okay? And deal with the tenants and maintenance. So the maintenance on rent to rent isn't like lease options where you take over everything. You have specified what you're going to look after. So I typically say any guest or tenant damage I will repair. And if sometimes I might refurb these properties as well to make them to a higher standard, but that's on my dime, not on somebody else's money. So that's an added benefit for the landlord. Now, why would I do that? Because I know that done up, I'm going to get it rented quickly, I'm going to host it quicker, and I'm going to be able to increase the rents, and I'm going to get more cash flow in. So ultimately, my costs will pay back. But in the deal analysis, I'll cover off how to structure a deal. But in essence, what we then do is, on our other example, obviously, we're going to make $2,500 on HMO, and on a 5-bed SA, we will be making something similar up to potentially £4,000 to £5,000 a month with some decent long-term contracts in there. So, that is possible on larger SAs, and that's why I like them, because they do work well. The outlay is a lot, or substantially more than, say, a 1 or 2 bed. But at the same time, you open yourself up to larger corporate bookings that, pay per head, per room, and tend to stay for the long term. So because for companies, it's all about economies of scale. They want to get as many guys into a property as they possibly can, so they're not having to rent loads of different places, because it's not only an administrative nightmare for them, but it normally means that it costs more money. So we are going to rent off a landlord for market value, and then we're going to make our profit by super renting it, and that's what this strategy is. Rent to rent for me is super rent. Okay, so we super rent the property, and we then run it as a serviced accommodation operation or a HMO operation, and we make the money in the difference. Now, you might say, why would a landlord do this? Okay, why would a landlord allow us to rent their property and do such a strategy? Why wouldn't they do it themselves is often the question that I get. Well, quite frankly, most landlords don't want the hassle. Okay, they're stuck in a traditional way of renting. They don't want to explore new avenues. They don't like change, and they're not interested. Okay, so which is great, because that falls into our favor. So I've got a few reasons why I really feel like, and I'm passionate about, that my rent to rent service offering to any landlord is better than a estate agent or a tenant. So number one, no voids. Never a void. Okay, if I say I'm going to rent it for 3 years, I'll pay 36 monthly payments. There'll be no voids. Okay, now a tenant, they could come in for 14 months and then leave. It might take a month to find another tenant. They might not pay. So there are void periods and risks for taking tenants on. Number two, there's a good chance I'm going to refurb that property for them. I tend to go after tired looking properties because I think those are the landlords that this service really works for. It's a good win-win situation. So I'm going to refurb the property on my money, okay, not their money. It's going to be cleaned every week. at least once a week, which means there's no end of term refurb. Okay, so typically when we get a property back off a tenant, it needs a bit of work. Might only be a few hundred quid, could be a grand, 1,500 quid if it needs a full decoration. Could be a canvas farm and cost 13 grand, which I've come across as well. So you just don't know. But with me, I'm going to clean it weekly. We've got cleaners in there. We've got eyes on the property every single week. It's cleaned, so there's no end of term refurb. So not only am I going to refurb it for them, when I give it back to them, it's going to be in a decent condition, a lot better than probably what they gave it to us in. So, and they haven't spent a penny, okay? There's no fees. So effectively, they're getting their property managed, but I'm not going to charge them a fee. I'm just going to pay them their rent every single month, never going to miss a month, and there's no fees. There's no management fees, there's no estate agent management fees, there's no tenant finders fees. So, you know, they're going to make more profit because they're not going to have to pay those fees. They're going to make more profit because there's going to be no void periods that they have to swallow. Okay. So there's, you know, and also remember during void periods, they have to pay council tax and utilities. So, you know, there's that added cost on top as well. So, you know, they are just some of the core fundamentals around why I believe Rent2Rent is a win for the landlord and a win for us. You know, there's a few more things that you could drip in there, but the bulk of them are no voids. I'm going to refurb that property for them. I'm going to clean it every week so there's no end of term refurbishment, and there's no fees from their side. You know, they're not going to pay estate and management fees or anything. So that does one thing to their bottom line, which is why they're doing this. That's why they're landlords. It's going to increase their profit. So explain properly. That is why a landlord would want to work with us. A few other benefits, obviously, hassle factor, 0. There's no tenants to deal with. I'm their only tenant, so there's no tenants. I can tell them as much or as little as they want to know. In my experience, most people just want to give you the keys and collect their money, and they know that the property is getting looked after. They don't even need to come and check on them because they know it's getting looked after, because we're advertising them on Spare Room or Airbnb or Booking.com. So if they want, they can just log on and have a look at the photographs and see what they look like. They know we've got to keep them in that condition to attract the guests or the tenants. Okay, so there's no hassle from their end. They don't need to get involved, which is, you know, another thing off their plate, gives them more time back and, you know, helps them as well. So that's why Rent2Rent works. A powerful strategy. And there's many, many, many landlords that are open to us because they don't want to do it. They don't want to do the super rents. They don't want to deal with guests. They're not bothered. They just want their monthly recurring income. And, you know, this works phenomenally well. And this is definitely one of the key fundamental strategies I've used to blow my cash flow up and ultimately help me then acquire more assets into my portfolio, because I use the cash flow from Rent2Rent to buy assets. So get stuck into it, do your research, figure out where your landlords are, network with them, and go and find your deals.